समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा?
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Reactions are pouring in after the Mojo story expose, a whistleblower's account where an employee or serving employee of VSR Ventures, the charter company from whom a plane was leased, the same plane in which Ajit Pawar and 4 others were killed, a whistleblower account making shocking and damning revelations. The person whose identity we have agreed to protect spoke to me on the condition of anonymity, but did give me his account in writing. And the details that have emerged make really for shocking consumption. They range all the way from allegations of corruption to financial influence to a collusion between the DGCA and the air operator that, by the way, has had the exact same model of plane crash in 2023, and the final probe report into the cause of that crash, in fact, is still awaited all this time later. Before I get into the details of that whistleblower account, for anybody who may have missed it, I want to introduce our very distinguished guest today. I want to first welcome to the program Wing Commander Sharad Panikar, who's of course not just an Air Force officer, but is somebody who has been a commercial pilot for many years. Thank you, sir, and welcome to the program. I also want to welcome Aditya Paranchpai, who has been an aviation expert, who is an engineer by training, and who has always very, very specific and technical insights into all of these air accidents that we have seen, unfortunately, this past year. I also want to welcome Abhijit Iyer Mitra to the program. He is somebody who, of course, whom we generally know as an analyst on politics and foreign affairs, but he has a keen interest in aviation and is an aviation geek. And if I'm not wrong, also has trained to get a license. Am I remembering this correctly? Yes. Sorry, can we unmute Abhijit just to let him finish that story for himself?
It's a private pilot's license, not a
private pilot's license. Yes, that's why I just wanted to correct that. And I also want to welcome to the program Mr. Sivaraman. Mr. Sivaraman is somebody who has been Revenue Secretary, but more critically in the context of this program, he is somebody who's been at the helm of the DGCA, and the DGCA finds itself in a lot of controversy after the whistleblower's account and even otherwise. So we welcome you to the program, sir, and we are thankful for your perspectives. All right, let's get straight into it. For anybody who has missed what the whistleblower, who is currently an employee of VSR Ventures, has said to me, and I have again his whole account in writing, a written testimony from this whistleblower. The most serious charge is, of course, that of corruption. And the whistleblower actually told me that there are credible allegations and a large belief within the organization that inspections by the DGCA, that's India's aviation regulator, have been influenced through what he calls payments to certain DGCA personnel. He even shared a few names with me, but on consideration, we have decided not to name names till we can verify those specific names ourselves. He explained this by saying that the organization basically has a belief where it uses quote unquote financial influence, which is payoffs or other inducements, rather than corrective actions. It's worth remembering, as I was mentioning, that in 2023, a plane from the same model, the Learjet 45, crashed in 2023, and we're still awaiting the final probe report from the AAIB on that. So how does this company, which according to my whistleblower gets away with repeated violations of safety norms, how and why does it get away? Well, it's linked to what the whistleblower is calling payoffs to personnel in the DGCA. The exact quote from the whistleblower is that persistent non-compliances go underreported by the regulator because DGCA personnel have been influenced. So we're really talking about a very serious corruption charge here when it comes to the regulator and this particular company. In fact, to quote exactly the whistleblower, what has happened with Ajit Pawar in Maharashtra is not an unforeseen accident. It is a result of a deliberate disregard for aviation safety. What are some of the examples of these deliberate disregards? I was actually shocked to discover that the whistleblower told me that the Cockpit Voice Recorder, the CVR, which provides critical evidence or is supposed to in the face of a calamity, the default is that these are left off on the fleet of VSR Ventures. Sir, I'll have to take you off while I go through this. All right. So let me actually underscore this. The Cockpit Voice Recorders are frequently switched off. This is really, really serious because, as I said, the CVR provides critical evidence in the face of a calamity. But apparently in this company, that's what the unspoken norm is. And this, of course, as the whistleblower says, if we can go on to the next slide, is in clear violation of every single rule. And checklists, which are a basic function, we all use them. We use them in our organizations, but the whistleblower is saying even checklist usage is largely absent. Now let's move on to another very, very serious example of a violation of safety norms, according to this whistleblower, who, as I mentioned, is the current serving employee of the VSR Ventures, which is that FDTL regulations are routinely violated. Let me explain this in simple terms. This concerns basically how much rest a pilot gets. And the whistleblower says that documents have actually been manipulated and falsified. So let me give you an example of this as we go to the next slide. Basically, if a pilot has flown, let's say, 12 hours today on a single day, the paperwork will show that those 12 hours were spread across 2 days so that the paperwork looks like no rules have been broken, whereas in reality, the rules have been broken. So the documents, according to the whistleblower, are routinely manipulated. And of course, I don't need to tell you, this has been a big debate even in the Indigo crisis. Pilot fatigue directly compromises flight safety, as the whistleblower reminds us. Finally, the whistleblower is talking about the absence of SOPs, standard operating procedures. He says that it is a rule in any aviation company that you either follow the manufacturer's SOPs or you follow the company's own SOPs. But here, there is no laid down SOP at all. So first officers are just catching up with every pilot who's following his or her own SOP. Neither the manufacturers nor the company SOPs are actually followed. And in fact, there is a comment, a very specific comment on the absence of a safety culture. The company has been described as a one-man company, despite reported warnings, by the way, repeated warnings from the trainers who actually warned the company that if you keep doing this, there is going to be an accident. But no heed was paid. And as the whistleblower says, there's an absence of a safety culture. It's a one-man company, a father and a son run it, and there is no functional safety management system or SMS. So we are looking at the whole gamut from corruption to non-compliance, from corruption to deliberate or willful or knowing negligence. And I'm going to open this up for conversation now. I'll start with you, Captain Panikkar. If I may, I had wanted to start with Mr. Sivaraman, but I'm really not sure whether he's on a stable line. So let me actually start with you. Are you shocked to hear some of these details?
They seem to have a fairly large fleet of aircraft. Last reported strength was 17, and now with one Learjet gone, they have 16 aircraft. So that's a considerable number of aircraft that they have. And if you take the pilot to aircraft ratio, I would imagine that they would require at least 2 to 3 sets of crew per aircraft. So I'm not sure whether there are any shortcuts are being taken or not. But in my idea, like just to give you a little bit of background, Barkha, when I was in the DGCA in Mumbai, I was looking after 8 of these NSOPs, non-scheduled operators. And I'm quite familiar with the working pattern, the culture, their the way they maintain their documents, etc., etc. I'm quite familiar with all of it. So considering organization of that size, I would imagine that they should have had a complete pilot's operating handbook, which is coming from the manufacturer, as well as your normal, the part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 of the operating instructions, and which would have had to be cleared by the DGCA. So somebody making a statement that no such documents exist or no such standard operating procedures exist for such a large organization, I think, I'm not too sure if that is factually correct, because with 30 odd pilots or 40 odd pilots operating,
I mean, this person basically said to me, every pilot has their own SOP. There's no laid down institutional SOP that everybody is required to follow. This is his allegation.
The default SOP would be that provided by the manufacturer, which would be available with every aircraft. So there would be a set of checklists that come from the manufacturer, which would perforce have. There's no way in which you can carry out a flight without a checklist. It cannot happen that I am a first officer on type or I'm a captain on type and I do not call for a checklist. How do you do your procedures then? And how do you do it at a scale at which there are 15 or 16 aircraft flying on a regular basis, possibly over 30 to 40 pilots operating on a daily basis, or as per the frequency of the non-scheduled operator? It is a little, I can't imagine a situation like this. I can imagine a situation
there are
where
other
you had
allegations.
Whether you had
I don't know. I can only report what we're being told. And what we do know is that this particular charter does not acquire the best professional reputation. I've done a little bit of digging on that. What we do know is that a plane from the same charter crashed in 2023. What we do know is the AIB has mysteriously not submitted a final report into that investigation. And what we do know is that the owner was very quick to say that there was nothing wrong with his planes. So this is what we do know. We also know, Wing Commander Panikkar, that there are very specific allegations coming from this particular whistleblower who is saying that he believes payments are being made to key DGCA personnel. He believes there are financial inducements. He's alleging collusion. He's also alleging that fatigue regulation or what's called the FDTL regulations, which is the number of hours a pilot should be allowed to fly without being fatigued, are being basically falsified on documents. Are you saying you believe none of it?
No, the latter part I'm inclined to agree with, that people can be influenced. And I'm extremely surprised that the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, which has to submit a report within 12 months of an accident, it has to submit what is called a closure report. Apart from the initial report, which has to come within 30 days, the final report has to come within a year, that is 12 months. If it happened in 2023 and we are in 26 now, it's something that the AAIB should be held up responsible for.
Oh, absolutely. I think 100%. I mean, it is absolutely bizarre that from 2023, all you can find is a preliminary investigative report on the website of the AIB. Let me bring in Mr. Sivaraman, sir. I'm hoping you can hear me. You've actually seen this. Yeah, sir, go ahead. You've seen this from the inside. We have a serving employee of this particular charter basically saying that there are payoffs and financial inducements to keep personnel inside the DGCA, right? And to me, of all of the allegations he's made, that is the most serious because it is a straightforward allegation of corruption. So you have been in a key position inside the DGCA. You've been a senior bureaucrat. Does this ring true?
Yeah, it's quite possible because I can't say with certainty it is possible. Number one, you must understand that the DGCA has got only 50% of the posts that has been sanctioned for the DGCA. So they have been very slow in recruiting people. Number two, there are over, I think, 350 to 400 private aircraft registered with the DGCA, of which more than 200 may be of this type or a sophisticated type, non-scheduled operators and private aircraft. Now, according to the CAR, Civil Airworthiness Regulations, every aircraft has to get a certificate of airworthiness every year. That is compulsory. That means the DGCA has to inspect every aircraft in all its facets, everything, including airframe, engines, whether they have been maintained properly. Now, you are Whistleblower mentioned something about manipulation of documents, particularly about the FDTL, the pilots flying more numbers, then they distribute over 2 days. That is not possible because, in the sense that if you look at the aircraft, when they start checking into the aircraft, they know the number of hours the aircraft are flown every day, probably over a period of months. And then they can verify it with the number of pilots who have operated that aircraft. They can easily find out whether a pilot has been overworked and he has crossed the FDTL.
But do they want to find out? But do they want to find out is the question.
That's another question. That's what you are now trying to find out. I mean, the problem is, you see, I can't say when I was DGCA, nobody could enter the office of the DGCA. The doors were shut. Nobody could come into the DGCA office. Number two, operating. Now, flight safety audit has to be carried out for non-scheduled operators also. One can say one can relax in the case of people owning their own aircraft and flying it themselves. But as far as non-scheduled operators are concerned, it is compulsory on the part of the DGCA to carry out flight safety audit. Whether they carried out or not, I do not know. Now, these are the questions that are being raised. Unfortunately,
can I ask you a follow-up? May I ask you a follow-up? Sorry to interrupt you briefly. You said when you were the DGCA, the doors were shut to outsiders from private companies being able to stroll in. Whether it is in the Indigo crisis, when we saw Indigo come to a standstill, or now, the allegations have been of proximity, of collusion, of people strolling in from these airlines, of financial inducements, of gifts that are not ordinary. Tell me, why did you feel the need to close your doors? Clearly, there were attempts to influence the DGCA personnel.
See, when I took over as DGCA, there was no DGCA of India for the last 3 or 4 years. Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was operating as DGCA. Afterwards, when Mr. VP Singh came, I was Additional Secretary of Commerce. He said that I must be shifted to the post of DGCA because there was no DGCA for 4 years. And there was that immediate accident of the Airbus 320 where 90 people died. So they asked me, they pushed me literally into that post. I was very, very reluctant to go in, but they pushed me into that post because probably they thought I was a very ruthless bureaucrat. But as far as the AIB is concerned, you were talking about the AIB, and I think Mr. Panikkar was talking about how many years they take to give a report. In the case of this Airbus 320, I gave a report within 1 month. 1 month, the report was submitted to the government, and I asked them to refly the aircraft. Indian Airlines was suffering crores of losses every month. So I asked them to refly the aircraft. Mr. VP Singh asked me, I said, I've given you the report. This is not going to change. They appointed a judge to investigate further with evidence, everything. Ultimately, the judge only said that the report given by the DGCA was right. So now you set up another organization, AAB, that is taking hell of a long time. People do not know what caused the accident. And as Mr. Panikkar was saying, the previous accident had taken 3 years and nobody has given a report and nobody is holding the AIB to account for it.
We are trying to hold the AIB to account, not just for this, but also for its rather ambiguous report on the Air India 171 crash. But this one is really shocking because 2023, a small jet, sir, crashes. Let me bring in Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Mr. Sevaraman, I have a lot more questions for you, but let me just get first comments from my other guests as well. Abhijit, there are so many mounting questions here. The 2023 report, the mishap that happened, the CCTV footage of that mishap, same Learjet 45, same charter. It's now in 2026 January, we don't have the final report. That's point one. Point two, the point is well taken from both Captain Panikkar and Mr. Sevaraman that the DGCA can get to the truth of all of these things. Nobody is suggesting that there's some mystery that the DGCA can't crack if it wants to. But does it want to crack this mystery? This youngish person, that's all I'll say about the identity of the whistleblower, he, I think, has shown a lot of courage in coming forward. He's terrified of losing his job. But he actually said that, look, this was an accident waiting to happen. This is not an accident. This is a product of deliberate, willful negligence. And he's given all of these examples, including financial inducements of key personnel of the DGCA. What stands out for you, Abhijit? What is the most galling in what you're hearing in this whistleblower's account?
Right. So first, let me just give a short caveat. A whistleblower usually has a gripe with the company. Okay. Now, that said, there is more than enough circumstantial evidence to show the DGCA is rotten to the core and it is corrupt to the core. And let me tell you why. What the group captain said was correct, partially. See, you are required to submit the interim report within 30 days of a crash, and then after 1 year, the final report has to be submitted. It is a convention. If they do not submit the report, there is an option. If you do not submit the report, you have to keep every year, you can postpone it indefinitely and just keep putting out annual updates. The classic example of this is China Eastern Airlines 5735, which crashed in 2022. The initial investigation came out in 30 days. After that, every year they keep putting out annual updates. Finally, after the Air India crash in AI 171 crash, when a huge amount of pressure was put on the Chinese Civil Aviation Administration, they said, we're not going to release the report because it's not in the national interest and not in societal interest to release it. Okay, and there are no consequences. We need to remember that ICAO has no consequences for actually not releasing that report. And even the annual update is an advisory. Now, why is the AI report taking so much time? This VSR crash happened in 2023. Have you even heard of the annual updates coming out from the DGCA? Nothing. There are no annual updates. I checked the internet. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will produce it somewhere and say, oh, well, it was hidden somewhere in some nondescript URL in their website. I doubt very much they've even produced that. Third, look at the Indigo crisis. What is the point of a fine, Barkha? A fine, an exemplary fine, is meant to hurt the bottom line of an airline. It is not meant to make it bankrupt. 22 crores? Are you kidding me? Even during the crisis, even with all the refunds, Indigo would have made a profit of 22 crores in 5 hours flat. Okay. Now, I want you, Barkha, if you can, get a what's it called? RFI, request for information. RTI, to actually file something saying who are all the decision-making guys in DGCA, bhai, behan, nephew, niece, beta, beti, who are all pilots or associated with airlines. You will never get the answer to that. You will never get the answer to that. The very fact that we're seeing a accumulation of events happen like this should tell you exactly how rotten, corrupt to the core the DGCA is. Imagine China has a closed banana republic, has more accountability than India at the moment.
And so why do you think in this year of tragedies, with so many questions and so many allegations, murky allegations around the DGCA, why is no one in government making an intervention? Why is the minister not making an intervention? Why is somebody above the minister not making an intervention?
Well, apparently, the minister wasn't even interested in going to Ahmedabad after the AI 171 crash. The Prime Minister's office had to call him and order him down there. I don't think this is a particularly aviation is a very geeky subject. It's like, students who either like mathematics or hate mathematics. I was one of those who hated mathematics. You could never get me to like mathematics. That, unfortunately, is the reality. Can I also just point out one thing? We brought up the China Eastern crash. There is also the horrible 1977 Tenerife air crash, which was probably the deadliest aviation disaster in history. Almost 600 people dead. There, one of the accident participants, KLM, issued a deviation report. It said, we disagree with the final report. And they came up with an interpretation which was still a cogent interpretation. It's not an interpretation I agree with, but it was cogent. They at least had the accountability to come up with that. Here, there is nothing of the sort. And if you remember in the Indigo crisis, Barkha, 2 of the people they named as being responsible, one had been on leave for 2-3 years or something like that on health grounds. They had a 2-year lead-in. Indigo was notified of the schedule, everything. They did nothing. Consequences, nothing. Management consequences, nothing. Penal consequences, nothing. Everything.
But that's a very grim situation, because it's actually, I keep trying to tell people that I have no technical expertise nor any personal skin in the game, but aviation safety is a public interest issue. Anybody who is able to get onto a plane should be concerned about what's happening with aviation safety, with the regulator. Aditya, if I may bring you in now, on the whistleblowers account, I take Abhijit's point that usually a whistleblower has a gripe with the company, but this is not in isolation. like I said, none of these things are in isolation. There is a lot of conversation around whether the regulator is operating from conflicts of interest, whether the regulator is doing its job, who wields the real authority within the regulator, what is the role of a regulator. And these, for a serving employee of a company to make these allegations cannot be without risk to him. That is also a caveat that we should actually put on the table. Does anything leap out to you as particularly disturbing in this account?
I mean, if it's true, the entirety of it is disturbing. If it is true, but having said that, look, I mean, again, now speaking purely from a technical perspective, look, DGCA, we know, as Mr. Sivaraman also pointed out, is understaffed. And what we saw with the Boeing 737 MAX episode in the US was very often the FAA relied on Boeing to certify the aircraft, basically certify or go through part of the certification process and sign off on it. So there's also that possibility. So I don't know, honestly, if I want to comment about whether things are actually that bad or that corrupt with DGCA. But let's also maybe, giving them the benefit of the doubt, they are understaffed. When I looked at the preliminary report from the 2023 crash and didn't find the final report, I mean, obviously it felt a bit damning, but on the other hand, it was also a case of, I know that they're understaffed. So is it just possible that they did not have the bandwidth to go through that investigation? But that is not an excuse for not going to the investigation, because every crash. But
then, Aditya, the point will be that if they're too understaffed to complete the 2023 investigation, how are they going to complete the Air India 171 investigation?
Yeah, I don't know. I think.
I mean, if we are saying the DGCA, let's give them for a moment the benefit of the doubt. The DGCA doesn't have enough people to complete the investigation into a crash where there were no casualties. I'm told one of the pilots was seriously injured, but there were no fatalities, I should say. If they haven't been able to complete that investigation, how are they going to complete the mammoth, very complex, very contentious investigation into the AI 171 crash? You see, that's the problem. There's a problem with the whole process of what we're talking about.
That's true. But look, there's a difference there. Look, honestly, Air India 171 has genuinely captured public imagination, because everybody flies an airplane like Air India 171. The common man does. Yeah. The fact of the matter is, if you look at some of these non-scheduled operators, these are flights flown by mostly people with a lot of resources, with a lot of wealth. And as common people, we rarely run into those airplanes. So I can imagine that in the public consciousness, what the NSOPs do, how they fly, how they conduct themselves is simply not part of our imagination. When something goes wrong with Air India, there's a sense that it could have been it could have been one of your dear ones.
I take that point, but in the end, a culture of aviation safety and the role of the regulator.
Absolutely, Barkha. And I was actually just coming to that, because look, I mean, regardless of what's actually happened here, the fact is, one of the individuals that was killed in the crash is the deputy chief minister, and sort of, reasonably popular in this part of the state. And I see this as an opportunity for us to talk about safety in our homes. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, we don't have a great reputation for a safety culture. But it's events like these that should allow us to start talking about it more openly. Remind people that safety is not restricted to aviation. It's something that you encounter in your day-to-day lives. That culture has to start at home. If individuals don't care, institutions don't care, and as a result, regulators don't care. Look, it's a chain. It doesn't start at the top. It starts at the very bottom.
I absolutely.
They hold everybody to account. And that's the culture that we really need to start talking about.
Yeah.
That's my view.
Absolutely. And we're going to get to the technical part of the conversation in just a moment. But Mr. Sivaraman, you were wanting to come in. I saw you raise your hand. Do go ahead, sir.
We are mixing up the responsibilities of the DGCA and AIB. AIB has been constituted separately only for purpose of investigating into accidents. DGCA is not involved in the investigation of accidents.
But does the AIB not come under the DGCA, sir?
Let me clarify. The DGCA, as soon as an accident takes place, its importance comes in from the point of view of certifying the aircraft for its airworthiness. Whether the pilots have been trained properly, whether the pilots have been given their proper rest, etc., the DGCA will inquire. The nitty-gritty of the accident, what caused the accident, why the accident took place, etc., and blaming somebody or not blaming somebody is a function of the AIB. Now, to whom the AIB reports, I do not know, probably to the Secretary of Civil Aviation, because when I was DGCA, there was no AIB. We were investigating all the accidents. We had our own accident investigation. We had a huge lab which had electron microscope, everything, crores worth of equipment were there. And we were giving the report within a month or month and a half, we were giving the report. That's all. Now, probably they are conducting very elaborate. They will pick up all the parts, lay it as though on a big floor to see where the parts are missing. All those things will be going on now, probably more detailed inquiry. So the DGCA, as far as DGCA is concerned, he comes into the picture, or the organization comes into the picture in regard to what happened prior to the accident. Whether the pilots were properly certified, whether the aircraft was properly certified for airworthiness, whether the maintenance was taking place properly. That is where the DGCA comes in. That is where, if at all there is any corruption, that is where they come in. And the AIB, of course, is different.
I think that point is well taken. I was just looking up who does the AIB report to, and all I'm able to find is that it is an attached office of the Ministry of Civil Aviation. And all accidents and serious incidents involving aircraft with an all-up weight of more than 2,250 kilograms or turbojet aircraft are investigated by the specialized investigation agency, and so on. So your point is well taken, but let's now open this up, for a wider conversation. There have been all kinds of very quick commentary on what was the reason for this crash. It went from weather to visibility to fog thi to fog to nahi thi, and we've had new CCTV footage. Abhijit, you shared this video with me, which actually shows the jet swerving and lurching to its left well before it lands. So this whole idea that something went wrong on landing is totally busted by this particular video footage. Just a quick comment from you, and then I'll take it to Wing Commander and Aditya. Yeah.
Look, if you match this video up with where exactly it crashed in the with the image of where it crashed respective to the runway.
Yeah.
This is a highly unusual angle. An aircraft is meant to line up with the runway a good 3-4 kilometers before landing. This is one of those, aircraft carriers. Even in an aircraft carrier, you don't see these landings. These are fighter pilot stunts that people do if you're coming perpendicular to the runway and turning. I don't know if it was a deliberate turn or it was a loss of control. It's impossible to say, to land at the last minute. And the problem there is, why were they not aligned with the runway from 3-4 kilometers prior, Barkha? Because you can see from the video I sent you of the aircraft turning, it was very clear. We've been hearing the weather was poor, weather was bad. You can see, and I can see that video itself has been taken from a few kilometers away. It is crystal clear weather. Visibility was around 3 kilometers as per the ATC.
Yeah.
Something is not adding up in what we're hearing, and I think a lot of information is being deliberately there. You see, now if you extrapolate this with where the plane makes a turn, it seems it was almost coming perpendicular to the runway and then trying to bank left to make a turn. You can't do that. And a Learjet especially, the Learjet was one plane I never aspired to fly. It is a very, very difficult plane to fly. Even with fly-by-wire and all the controls that have been added on top, it's a very unforgiving plane.
So let me get Captain Panikar to respond to this. Yesterday on our program, we had the Federation of Pilots head, Captain Randhawa, saying that the plane should never have been cleared for approach. Now, it's very important to also say that these are not ATC-controlled airfields, and visibility, when visibility is mentioned in this context, is the visibility for a visual approach, and those points need to be underscored. However, do you believe that there is a serious VIP culture pressure? The pilots have been talking about this, that when they're ferrying somebody important or powerful, they'll often say, or they won't say, their cronies will say, "Bas pahunchna hi hai." Questions are being asked as to why this plane did not turn back. It did a go around on its first attempt at landing. Do you also agree with Abhijit that some things are not adding up? That when you see the CCTV video of the plane basically spinning or flipping in the air, something went wrong with this aircraft well before landing.
Barkha, I couldn't hear what Abhijit said. If you could just quickly encapsulate what he mentioned.
Well, let's just go to the CCTV video. I hope you've had a chance to see the plane.
Yes,
flipping.
I've had a look.
And,
Yes.
and I was saying that other experts, other pilots have been saying, why was the plane cleared to land at all? Why was it cleared? Why did it not turn back?
He had already made an approach. It was in VFR conditions.
Yeah, but he did a go around the first time. He did a go around the first time. Yeah.
I would like to take a minute on this. Okay, first and foremost, the approach made was to runway 11, which is basically an easterly runway. You're coming into the sun. Okay, the magnetic heading of that runway would probably be somewhere between, I would say, 105 and 115. So it's east and tending towards the southeast. That is the direction in which he's coming. It's early morning, and let's say the time is around 8:40, 8:45. So the sun is, let's say, about 8 degrees, 10 degrees above the horizon. Now try and visualize this. You're coming in on final approach. There is a fair amount of low-level haze. Do remember that Baramati does not have an independent meteorological station. The meteorological reports for Baramati is raised somewhere in Shirdi, okay, which is about 150 kilometers. Be that as it may, the visibility was within the prescribed criteria. If the visibility was not within the prescribed criteria for that particular approach, the pilot wouldn't even have attempted a landing. So the fact that he's been cleared for the approach indicates that the meteorological visibility at that particular point in time was within limits. That's one. Number two, you're flying into the sun. Okay? You are looking out for the runway. There is no instrument landing system available. The only thing that you can do is to pick up the runway visually, align yourself, and come in and land. The fact that they went around the first time, despite the visibility being okay, is the fact that the sun would have been directly into their eyes. They would have picked up the runway late and decided that the parameters that they had at that particular point in time would have lent itself to an unstabilized approach had they continued. So they took the correct decision to execute what is called a go-around maneuver, in which they open up power again, go around and attempt one more approach. Now, what has happened in the second approach is that something similar would have happened. They have reported sight with the runway, then lost contact with the runway, possibly because of the sun in their eyes, possibly. Now, this is speculation. Picked it up at the last moment, picked up the runway at the last moment, and then attempted to try and make a landing out of it. Okay. Now, a few things that go on in a pilot's mind. Okay, I understand that Abhijit has done a certain amount of flying. Now, I've been flying for a long time, 40 plus years. Just to go through what happens in a pilot's mind is that when you're attempting a landing, a visual landing, you are looking to pick up some visual reference, preferably the runway, if not the environment that is surrounding that particular runway, aligning yourself quickly, quick check on parameters, and then carry out a landing. There are certain parameters that have been laid down by the Flight Safety Foundation, which is also recommended by the DGCA, which is called a stabilized approach criteria. In the case of a visual approach like this, the aircraft should have been completely stabilized in the visual approach, 500 feet above the threshold elevation. It is, from what it appears in the CCTV footage, now I have no idea how far it is, so it's impossible to geometrically coordinate as to what was the altitude of the aircraft at that particular point in time. But it is clearly low enough. And the rate at which the bank is coming on is fairly rapid. Now, I've flown fighters, okay? The one in which you give a control input and she responds almost immediately.
Yeah.
Commercial aircraft, on the other hand, are designed to not respond so quickly because you're carrying passengers, you're carrying cargo. When you give a certain amount of a control input, she responds, but she responds after a certain amount of a lag. Responds much slower.
Yeah.
The rate at which this bank has come on is fairly sharp, and it looks fairly steep, indicative of two things. Okay, one is that almost like a panic maneuver in which you've given a full-scale control deflection, and or maybe a little bit of a technical fault. If you want bank to come on at that rate, coupled, now I'm not making any allegations, I'm not making a statement, I'm just painting a scenario in which bank can come on so quickly, is if you have a failure or reduction in power of, let's say, the left engine, the right engine is still developing power, this can also lead to a role or an assisted role.
Got it.
So all these three things would lead itself to this rapid putting on of bank or last moment picking up of the runway, ignoring the fact that you're supposed to be stabilized by 500 feet.
Okay. Aditya, if you would like to add to that, and then I'll take last comments. Aditya?
Yeah. So, so a couple of things. So first off, when the crash happened, I think it's something I should probably insist on, which is, I mean, we have very limited data points, right? We have 3 data points to be sure. We have the photos from the crash. We have this little video clip, and we have some limited data from flight radar. And incidentally, that stops when the airplane is a fair distance from the runway. Now, a couple of things stood out. I don't know if, I mean, one thing that you may have noticed, Barkha, is that in one of the crash photos, you can see the rudder being extremely to the left, right? I don't know if you've spotted this, but if you look at a different angle of the same photo, you'll see the rudder is extremely to the left. That to me actually looked very interesting. But
this
I'll
one?
hold on
Can
to
you
that
see it in this? Can you see
no,
it in
it's
this
not.
photo?
This is actually a photo which is taken from almost a forward aspect. But yeah, I think the photo prior to this, you could actually see it.
Can you go
Just
to the previous one,
that.
please?
Yeah. No, the one after this. No, I think
it's
we just
previous.
lost.
Yeah,
we just lost it at some point. But anyhow, it's extremely to the left, right? Now, second thing, there's a lot of. I mean, when you saw in the video the plane banked, quite honestly, and I could be wrong here, but I couldn't decipher from that image whether it was a right bank or a left bank. Okay, not 100% sure. Now, here's a model airplane. Okay, again, sorry, this is not what the actual airplane looked like. This is a 737. Here's a rudder. When the rudder goes left, extreme left, it does two things. It produces a force to the right, and it forces the plane to yaw to the left. That left yaw, because the airplanes are statically stable by design, they also bank left to kill the side slip. Okay. So when I see the rudder being that far to the left, and I see that the airplane's potentially banked left, it would make sense. All right. Now I'm not suggesting as to why that input came into being. It's just that input came into being somehow. We don't know why. But it's another possibility. As I said, it wasn't clear if the bank was to the right or the left. If that bank was to the right, and if the airplane had indeed entered something known as a stall and incipient spin, and I'll qualify that statement in just a moment. If it had entered a right spin for any reason, a left rudder is what the pilot would instinctively do to recover the airplane. So that left rudder, depending on which side the airplane banked, comes with slightly different interpretations. Okay. Now, what was interesting, regardless of which way the airplane banked, it's the rate of bank that's interesting. It's extremely high.
Yeah, why is it spiraling? Why does it lurch?
I think more than the spiral, it's the rate of bank that's interesting. Okay. That bank was so fast that it's not a very routine thing. So as Captain Panikkar clearly said, it could happen because of a panic maneuver, but it could also happen because the airplane stalled and entered a spin. Okay.
Yeah.
Both of these are possible. Now, here's the thing. This is what we can gather from looking at the video clip, the shot of the rudder, which is extremely to the left, and also in flight radar. By the way, I could be wrong, but if you take that flight radar clip and take it all the way to the end, at least the one that's available to people without having to pay a premium, it looks like the airplane slide to the right of the runway, not to the left of the runway where that flight radar clip stops. But of course, it could have eventually maneuvered left. Now, right now, there are two things in here. That extreme maneuver, regardless of whether it's stall or otherwise, suggests one of two things. Look, those maneuvers can happen if there is a defect in the control mechanism, or it can happen because the pilot accidentally stalled the airplane or accidentally maneuvered the airplane. Both of those possibilities are on the table, but until we see an accident report, it's impossible to determine which of the two it is. So consequently, while all these discussions have been going on about visibility, about the difficulty of landing at the airfield, I think somewhere there's an implicit assumption that it was the pilot who messed it up. And I'm like, okay, it's possible, but I think we need to hold on to it until we really see a report, because both of those possibilities, a failure in the actual mechanism, can also trigger a spin, it's, I mean, look, it's impossible to tell from just this little bit of data that we have at this moment.
I don't think any of us are making very definitive assessments of what has caused this. I do need to start taking last comments. Mr. Sivaraman, at this point, what would you be urging the DGCA to be doing? I understand that it's the job of the AIB to probe what caused this crash, but there are larger questions of the credibility of the DGCA that have now been asked persistently in the last few months. And, I would like your thoughts on that.
DGCA, first of all, I would look into every detail of maintenance of this aircraft, personally, not through subordinate officer. Personally, I would go through the maintenance record of this aircraft. Number two, I would go through the training program of both the pilots, whether they had been adequately trained to land in adverse weather conditions. Number three, I would also look into the cockpit voice recorder to know why the pilot could not turn back if he had said the runway was not in sight, whether he was under pressure from the minister that he should land because thousands of people were waiting for him. Now, these are three important aspects which I would look into, because there is suspicion on the officers of the DGCA for having cleared this aircraft or having cleared the pilots. The DGCA personally should look into it. I wonder whether he has the ability or the inclination to look into it, but he must personally look into it. And if I were you, I would ask the minister to issue a directive to the DGCA that he must personally look into the records, because there are allegations of corruption against the officers involved in this case.
Sorry, I muted myself by mistake. I said, Mr. Sivaraman, that's a very clear point that you're making, that the minister himself must issue a directive to the DGCA to A, personally look at the fleet, B, look at the CVR. What is the CVR telling us, if it was on? Because remember, the whistleblower is saying the CVR in these planes was not always on. But if it was on, was there any unspoken or spoken pressure, Abhijit? And this is something, pilots have been talking about this, that there is a kind of pahunchna hi pahunchna hai thing that happens when you're flying important people, rich people, powerful people. A closing thought to you before we end.
So just two things, because
Abhijit. See,
Sorry.
I have traveled with the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Mr. Arjun Singh, several times in the interior areas, Ariva, Patna, all kinds of places, all kinds of landing ground. Never was an incident. There was never an incident, because the pilots were very distinguished pilots, never from the Air Force or anything. They were ordinary civilian pilots, but they never took any chance. Neither Mr. Arjun Singh ever insisted upon landing if the pilot did not want to land.
Okay, I'm giving Abhijit the closing word. What would you be looking at for the aviation minister, for the DGCA, for the AIAB to be doing at this point?
Right. Just two things. The thing about, just like the defense conversations you've had me on, I try to avoid jargon as much as possible. So just to explain, sorry, Aditya, I'm not second guessing you or anything. Just for the audience, yaw is like this, bank is like this, just in case they didn't get it. So just giving you a visual.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yeah.
So that said, look, DGCA, AIB, and the Civil Aviation Ministry, they are all linked. The AIIB will not have to come into the picture if the DGCA was doing its job properly. Now, the way corruption works out here is it filters, because nobody assumes they're going to have a crash, but ultimately they do need the AIIB to clean up the mess when a crash happens. So there is a linkage between the DGCA, the AIIB, and the Civil Aviation Minister. Right now, unfortunately, we have an absentee Civil Aviation Minister who seems completely unconcerned and does not seem to be able to take care of this department. Have you heard anything from him in the last 2 days, Barkha? Nothing. You literally had to get the PMO to get involved when AI 171 happened, to get that man even to go down to Ahmedabad and take charge of things. We can't run, the Civil Aviation Ministry is a very important ministry. You can't run it basis absentee ministers like this. And AIB, DGCA, they're fundamentally lockstep linked. You have to sort this out. You're playing with people's lives. Not doing this from now on is going to be tantamount to murder, effectively.
And those are very, very strong words, but they're true words. Captain Panikkar, you're wanting to add to that?
Just for clarification, AAIB is independent of the DGCA because an accident investigation can very well point fingers at the DGCA, and the DGCA cannot investigate itself and say, I'm at fault. So please keep in mind, Abhijit, that these are two independent organizations. That's number one. Number two, a small clarification about the flight duty time, which Mr. Sivaraman had mentioned about.
I'll let you respond, Abhijit.
Yeah. So while the flying hours themselves can always be verified from the ATC, for example, it knows what time an aircraft has gotten airborne from a runway. It knows what time an aircraft has landed into some other runway. So those times are all available. It's all cross-verifiable. What is not verifiable is the duty time. For example, I've heard multiple cases. I've got lots and lots of friends that are flying in civil aviation, in general aviation, where a VIP, for example, is supposed to come at 9 o'clock in the morning. So the pilots are there 1 hour or 2 hours before preparing for the flight. And suddenly the VIP has got some commitments and he shifts it to 10 o'clock. Then he shifts it to 12 o'clock. Then he shifts it to 6 in the evening. And now this pilot has reported at 6 o'clock in the morning for an 8 o'clock flight. At 6 in the evening, is still on the ground. And that's where the manipulation can happen. And that's where these problems occur about fatigue, flight duty time limitation. That can be manipulated because there's nobody who's monitoring it except for the entry that you make into a log that pilots have reported at so-and-so time.
So maybe
this is kept ambiguous.
Yes. So I think I should have, maybe that is my error, that I said, flying hours, but basically I meant duty hours, in the sense that how long a pilot has been at work is something that this whistleblower definitely believes can be manipulated.
Completely agree.
Okay. All right. So that is my error. I should have used my words more carefully. Abhijit, I'll let you respond to Captain Panikkar's point. I don't think you were saying the AIB is not separate. I think you were saying if the DGCA were better, there would be no accidents or there would be fewer accidents, and therefore the AIB would be less necessary. But I'll let you say it for yourself.
Sorry, I also wasn't clear. What I'm alleging here is a pattern of collusion. When the investigator refuses to release reports, the clearest, repeatedly, over and over again, then the only conclusion you can draw is that the investigator is essentially colluding with the regulator, is in cahoots. They may be independent, but clearly they're colluding. Once can be a freak, twice can be a coincidence, 3 times in a row, I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Sivaraman, I do have to close so quickly. Yes, sir.
1 minute, one word. Abhijit, I have seen you as a boy playing in front of my house. You must be very careful with your words.
Yes.
You may charge with libel. You are going public. Yes. Please remember that this kind of a statement that the minister, the ministry, the DGCA, AIB, all are corrupt and they are colluded. That's not the kind of statement I would expect.
But may I respond? To say that a lot of people for the last year, Mr. Sivaraman, I've been seeing mishap after mishap, tragedy after tragedy, and there is genuine reason to feel both disappointment, anger, and cynicism, Mr. Sivaraman, with respect when you see a 2023 report not completed in 2026. When you see a very shoddy, I'm using this word at the risk of facing libel, I'm ready for it, a very shoddy preliminary probe report into AI 171 put in the public domain, where an actual transcript is not reproduced, where actual timestamps are not given. How can you, young though Abhijit may be, passionate and impetuous though I may be, fault the people of India for being cynical, sir? Mr. Sivaraman. Okay, I think we just lost his connection there, but we have to close. Abhijit, I'll let you respond to that slight rap on the knuckles that you and I got there.
No, Sivaraman uncle still remembers me as a little boy playing with his son Siddharth. We were neighbors in Chanakyapuri. So, yes, he has that prerogative. He was colleagues with my dad. So I give him that, and I'm ready for the libel. I'm ready. There's lots of libel going on against me. I'm totally ready for it.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much. This conversation can carry on for hours, and we will make sure that we don't leave it here. We don't let it become a forgotten headline. I'm going to say thank you to our guest, to Wing Commander Panikkar, to Aditya Paranjpe, to Abhijit Iyer, and to Mr. Sivaraman, who unfortunately lost his connection. Thank you so much, and we look forward to continuing this very important reportage and conversation and not taking our eye off the ball. Thank you for watching. See you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.